The geographic South Pole. Surrounded by an entire continent of extreme conditions, it is one of the most inaccessible places in the world. Antarctica itself was not even discovered until 1820, at which point reaching the South Pole became the ultimate object of human exploration. In 1821, American Captain John Davis first landed on the ice. In 1839, James Clark Ross tried and failed to sail to the South Pole. Then, in 1901, British explorer Robert Falcon Scott embarked on the first land attempt to travel from coast to pole, only to be forced to turn back 530 miles from the pole. 5 years after returning home, Scott began preparation for his second voyage, the ill-fated Terra Nova Expedition, which ended in tragedy. The Terra Nova officially set sail from Wales on June 15, 1910. While there was an obvious desire to reach the pole, the objectives of the expedition stretched out far beyond that. A massive amount of resources were dedicated to geographical and scientific advancements in the fields of zoology, geology, and meteorology. Chief Scientist Edward Wilson went on record to say that no one can say that it will have only been a pole hunt. We want the scientific work to make the bagging of the pole merely an item in the results. So, for the first year and a half, the team, which consisted of 65 men, embarked on a number of scientific expeditions while slowly making their way further south. Then, on January 3, 1912, at a latitude of 87 degrees and 32 minutes south, a team of 5 men broke off from the remainder of the crew to voyage to the South Pole alone. These 5 men were Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, Edgar Evans, Lawrence Oates, and Captain Robert Scott himself. By January 9th, they had passed Edward Shackleton's furthest push at 88 degrees and 23 minutes south. A week later, they spotted Roald Amundsen's flag from 15 miles from the pole. Amundsen, a Norwegian explorer, had deceived the public about the nature of his expedition and immediately went south instead of to the North Pole, with the goal of being the first to reach the southern pole. On January 17, 1912, the next day, Scott's team reached the pole only to discover that Amundsen had landed there 32 days prior. In his journal, Scott logs, "The pole, yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected. Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. Well, it is something to have got here. Now for a desperate struggle to get the news through first. I wonder if we can do it." They then began their trek back. During the first 3 weeks, they made exceptional progress. However, Scott began to worry about the physical condition of the crew, especially Edgar Evans, who at this point was suffering from extreme frostbite. Nevertheless, they pushed forwards, but were met with difficulty in locating a depot that was set up on the trip south. Evans' health continued to deteriorate, though, suffering from a hand injury that refused to heal, severe frostbite, and is thought to have had a head injury from falling. Scott notes he has absolutely changed from his normal self-reliant self. On February 17th, he collapsed and died. 10 days later, they reached latitude 82.30 degrees south, the meeting point where a team of dogs were supposed to relieve them. Still 3 days ahead of schedule, they set up camp in the depot to wait for the dog teams to arrive. However, they were then met with 3 critical difficulties: the non-appearance of the dog teams, an unexpected large drop in temperatures, and a shortage of fuel in the depots. They were further slowed down by the frostbite in Oates' left foot, which reduced daily marches to less than 5 miles. By March 10th, it became depressingly evident that the dogs were not coming to relieve them. That same day, Oates, now barely able to walk, somberly stood up and announced, "I'm just going outside, and maybe some time." He walked into the frozen wasteland to die. While Oates' sacrifice did speed up the group, it may have been too little too late as frostbite began to set in Scott's right toes. Scott, Wilson, and Bowers struggled on to a point 11 miles south of the depot, but were halted on March 20th by a fierce blizzard. Despite daily attempts, they were confined to the tent. The blizzard proved too serious for the group to push on. The 3 were found side by side, frozen in place. Scott's body showed signs of agitation, so it is presumed that he was the last to pass away. On March 29, 1912, Scott wrote his final journal entry. "Every day we have been ready to start for our depot 11 miles away, but outside the door of the tent it remains a scene of whirling drift. I do not think we can hope for any better things now. We shall stick it out to the end. But we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. R. Scott." Last entry: "For God's sake, look over our people."